How are you doing? I see yesterday's party was heavy, but it's good. Some tough guys here. Very good. I hope everybody had his coffee shot to be awake for app marketing today. So since obviously we're a small group, feel free just to ask anytime, any question, and otherwise we can make a little bit enlarged panel if you like. So it's like a big team meeting. Okay. So actually today I'm going to present you something that is quite new. As you all know, app marketing is very popular since a few years, and everybody who has an app has to look how you get your users. But when you try to acquire new users, obviously there's a high amount of users. You always lose users who open the app only once. And to solve that problem, we have worked hard for over a year now to develop something that we call mobile app retargeting solution. And before I get into more detail, let me give you a quick overview of the market first. So if you look at the in-app mobile advertising spend, you see that it grew extremely. I mean, you've heard it 1,000 times. You've heard it yesterday and the past few years. So I'm just going to go quickly through it. You see here, you can read it from 2.4 billion to a 7 billion spend in 2015. It's a huge number, obviously, but it's probably, in my mind, only the beginning. The biggest spender in mobile advertising is still gaming, as they're normally ahead of their game in terms of making users, or are being very smart in making users pay. So they have a lot of budget also to spend, and they have learned a lot about how to spend wisely and what to do. And we work very closely with the gaming guys to be really at the cutting edge and to see what can you do. So let's take a look at mobile ad spend. You will see that in 2018, the in-app app spend, it will be just super big. You see around 40%, and the other part will be on general mobile internet and messaging, obviously taking part, at least if one day WhatsApp is going to allow or doing some ads in their app. Here you see an average overview, an overview of the average cost to acquire new users, where you can see how it developed over time. It's still quite high compared to the lifetime value you usually make with the average user. But over time, the more efficiency gets into the ad market, the smarter you can actually exploit and advertise. So you reduce the acquisition prices and you increase the lifetime value. Here you see billions of app downloads. We have seen that yesterday. So nothing new. It's growing super quickly, and I think the best way somebody summarized it is Fred Wilson, who said, we still underestimate the power of mobile. Now today you have 900 million Android users, 600 million iOS users. Nevertheless, iOS still makes, in most cases, much more money for the app developer than Android. Generally, and I think that's an advantage of the App Store, the users will find more quality apps versus on Android. You have more apps, but there's more freedom to do. So now let's come to the really interesting part. So how many apps a user has usually installed? Well, in average, 26 apps, but that average has a high standard deviation. So you will find users, we see in our database with only the standard 10 apps, and you will find others with 100 apps. Generally in South Korea, you have, due to Samsung and their promotion, everything, you can also call it Samsung country, as 95% have Android phones. They have the highest amount of apps installed versus on France. They obviously like to have less apps on their phone. I mean, open to interpretation here. On the user retention rate, and that is the one where we especially look after, and that's since, I mean, the Flurry guy yesterday was stating it quite well. The install is only the very first start. Everybody's looking into CPI and trying to get a better install, but just look at it as a better, as a user who opened your website, has stayed a little bit there to make a comparison to online website. It's great to have it, but at the end it doesn't mean anything if you don't make something out of it. So what you see here is the general retention over iOS and Android, which starts obviously at 100%, and then after first month, you're already down to 38%. Then goes down to 29, 24, and so on. At the end of a year, you will end up with only 4%. Now, if you combine that chart with the monetization curve of your own app, you can see how many users and how much potential you lose. This is an interesting chart that is showing you on the x-axis the retention over 90 days, and then on the y-axis the frequency of users per week, and you can see that in communication, you're obviously very high. If it's a very popular communication app, everybody's using it, and super frequent, and a super high retention rate. On the lower end, you will find apps like personalization or music. Whereas music, obviously, you need to divide between apps like Spotify, which might on the other side be on the upper right one, and then other apps which are low. Interesting is on the social gaming is if you use an app, obviously you use it very frequently, but not for very long. And weather is maybe the other one, is you may only look at it every few days when you're interested in it, or every day at max, but you use it for a long, long time. Now coming to loyalty, as you can first see, is you have a very high amount of disloyal users, so 70%. Which you can see here, basically everything above here. And then the number of times divided. And here you can see also the differences between Android and iOS. And you see that the number of times an app was used is a little bit higher when you look at the first time use on iOS. But over time, it basically equals out. And the more important message on the slide is, what about those 70% of users that you use? So here's another way to look at it. 69% of the people open an app 10 times or less, and 25% only use an app just once after downloading. Okay, so how do we solve that problem? How do we make sure that we exploit a little bit more of that very valuable user base of 70% of your users that you have costly acquired, but are not doing anything in your app? Now, you might say, okay, hey, I have push notification. I don't need to do anything else. I simply get the user back. The bad news is, unfortunately, only 30% accept push notification. And of those, 40% in average accept it always, and mostly 15%, meaning that 70% of the users don't accept it. And I mean, you know it from your own personal behavior, I guess. You typically accept push notification for apps which you already regularly use, some apps that you deem as important that you give them the right to send you regular messages. So this doesn't help you here. Now, how do you solve the problem? How do you get them back? Let's jump here, Derek. Since 90% of the users immediately leave after downloading and didn't buy anything on e-commerce, Let's look at how online retargeting works before we come to mobile retargeting. And as you all know, companies like Criteo are super successful helping online retailers and other companies getting users back. So in general, in the online retargeting, only 2% of the shoppers convert on the first visit. Now, you can increase that conversion rate by 300% if you re-engage with those users. And that's what we took as something where we said, okay, that's so interesting. Why can't we do that in mobile? Well, it's not that easy since you're working with apps, which is different than obviously with the websites, but there's a good message here. When somebody already downloaded your app, you have a stronger bond with that user than with a user that simply visited your website. So you can build up on a stronger loyalty already, but you need to make sure he comes back. So let's look at the conversion funnel still. Here, if 98% of the online site users who leave the website. We are not there in mobile yet, fortunately, but it will go further down. So we need to work against that. Retargeting spend is everywhere on the rise. I leave that too. And all, you can look at it, all verticals, basically, all major verticals use online retargeting already. And that's a strong sign. That's something that generally works with users. So it can be Amazon on e-commerce, or Kayak on travel, or King.com on gaming, right? Now let's come to the crucial part. Here you see on the left side how it normally looks in an app. So you have a few users who purchase something, maybe in a game, who in a purchase in a retail app, who buy something there. Then you have some more users who regularly return but don't do anything. But the vast majority of the users are the ones who are dormant, who don't use your app. And what you obviously want to is to increase the orange part. You want to increase more of those users who may help you monetize the app. So what if you could somehow get back to those users? What you need to do in order to do that properly, you need to know the individual, you need to know what interests them then, you need to know where to retarget them and how to actually drive them back. So let me give you an example of how gaming is doing the acquisition first. So they typically have a top tier 3 division of how they do acquisition. So the top tier 1 networks, they pay them $5 CPI because the quality of users are very high coming in there. Top tier 2 networks, $3 CPI, and then for the lower bottom, $1.50. Now, if you do this, you obviously want to make sure that especially for those users that you got through tier 3, where the amount of users is, that are not loyal, and sometimes even some incentivized ads are in there, you want to make sure that you exploit this vast amount of users. So if you re-engage, if you do re-engagement on ads, you can actually increase the likelihood of a purchase by 77%. If you do this, and we have had a few case studies doing it, for example with Mobile.de, which is like the auto trader of UK, we were ourselves really surprised by that number. We decreased the actual cost of getting that user by 61% compared to acquiring a new active user. Now, at the end, it doesn't matter if you acquire a new user or if you re-engage an existing user, because the existing user who is dormant is basically lost already, 99% of the cases. So you can actually look at them as a new user. And then, if you look at it that way, you see that 62% less acquisition cost is massive. And that is the core message, what we have found out. And that is why we see now really huge interest coming into our mobile retargeting solution. On top of that, and that's a surprising positive add-on to this, is the average conversion rate for in-app purchases or for some purchases of e-commerce products is 150% higher than for an average active user. So let's look at it in detail. The case study of Mobile. You see here on the left side, the gray one is the new acquisition, and the orange one is the re-engagement one. These both start with 100%, right? Now, if you have a completely new user in the mobility web, and it's against like Auto Trader, so you basically use it as a marketplace to look and find new cars, you will see that only 39% of the users search for cars, 34% do a detailed search, and then 9% add it to a favorite, and only 0.8% do a final action. Now, if you do this with a re-engaged user, 61% of them do actually already do search, 45% a detailed search, and 11% add it to favorite, and 2% do a final action. That's more than double of what the normal active acquisition acquired user does. And this is only regarding the actions. Now, the cost of getting them is significantly higher too. So you see it's 62%. So if you add it, it's it's a simple calculation. It's really it's if you have an app where you monetize with that kind of solution, it helps you to monetize much better. Now, this is basically a little bit more detail how it actually works. So what you have as a challenge when you acquire a new user, they click on an ad, they get into the App Store. They look at the App Store, then they have to click on download. Then maybe they have to enter a password or a fingerprint. They have to wait until it downloads. Then they have to get back to the home screen, and then they have to start the app. Those are major steps between you, or major blocks between you and the user. Once they have done all that, you don't want him to do it all again, right, when you re-engage the user. So what we have done is, if your app allows a deep linking, which is basically a very simple function allowing anyone or yourself creating a link which automatically opens your app, and we use that function in a banner. So when you click on a banner, you basically land immediately in your app. And if you do it really well, you can actually specify specific landing pages inside your app. That's obviously the cutting edge today. Nearly nobody does that. It's starting, but this really helps you too. So the user clicks on the ad, and it's there where you want him to be. Okay, and below you see, for example, in order to do it, we need to find the user. And in order to find the user, it's like the needle in the hay. You need to find the right user for you, the one in between all those millions of users. So what we do is we connect it to the major traffic sources via a real-time bidding system, and we will see that user within 100 milliseconds. We actually buy that impression. And that's the technology behind it. It's really complicated if you build it, but it's super powerful, and it allows you to be user specific when you do advertisement. That's something completely new in mobile. Here are a few examples of what we can do. So you can chase searchers, for example, in the e-commerce app, and say somebody looked at the product on Monday at 8 p.m., and then the next morning, where the same person, for example, opens a weather app, we show him a banner where he sees the product of what he has looked at yesterday, and then he lands into the right spot inside the app. Obviously, that is something that is difficult to do, but if you do it right, then you know it from online. Everybody has seen those retargeting ads. Sometimes they annoy, but they are really powerful. right? Now, the second one is the one I spoke about already. It's just to retarget dormant users. So we like to take like a 3-month length when you define dormant users. So somebody looked at an app in August, didn't use it for a while. In October, we say, hey, why don't you come back? Click on the ad, and then you show him something. And it's really up to you to say, okay, well, I'm going to show him an ad where, I promote him a really cool new function he can use, or another reason why you should come back to the app, or simply, remind him, hey, there was a reason, right? So come back. In general, there was, a certain motivation to download your app in the first place. So why shouldn't he come back? And then, you can try to retarget the users that are already very valuable to you and to tell them, well, in my game, you bought already 3 in-app purchases, and now I have something super cool new. Why don't you come back and, buy that too? Something that works very well in e-commerce online as well. And you can personalize the offers as much as your own system, your own database allows it to do. The more you personalize, obviously, the better. So you can, the potential is endless, and we are just at the very, very start of it. So you can personalize by what he has looked at. You can personalize by specific offer per day. You can could personalize by the weather the weather that's currently running where he is right now. You can personalize by what he has done before. Endless possibilities, and ourselves, we just start to learn what works and what doesn't work. But in general, the more personalized you do it, the more appealing it is, obviously. Yeah, so that's it. If you're interested, we're always happy. Since we're a small group, I'm also here. I'm happy to answer questions. And if you want to get in touch with us, the best person to speak to is John. You see here his contact details, and he was very happy to help you out with more information. Thanks.
Do you have any solution on advertisement on navigation applications? They always struggle with the. They always struggle.
It's fine. Thanks.
They always struggle with the sort of a hyperlocation advertising, even ways with tens of million users had very low revenue because they just couldn't crack that sort of hyperlocation advertisement. And how do you? Is there any future development in this?
Well, so we haven't started to run it with navigation. We're just at the start of it. We are speaking to some navigation. As you know, you'll always see it when you look at the German App Store. In most app stores worldwide, gaming and then e-commerce the biggest one. In Germany, it's often navigation. We like cars, we like driving, so it's something we really look at. But we just start to make it. But in general, the model should work on navigation too, because when you have somebody who downloads a specific app and you take into account other information, that person is driving around a lot, you can get other data from location providers. You can tell them, well, why don't you buy that add-on or that add-on, because we know already you do this. And we have seen it with other apps that people sometimes don't buy add-ons because they don't know if they exist, or they didn't look into it, they forgot about it. So it helps them to come back to them and buy that specific in-app purchase.
Mm-hmm. Also, you mean get some in-app purchase for the navigation app promoted in a different application? Or?
That would be one way. Yes, but you can also do it another way. I mean, you can say, you can try to bring him to a part of your app where, in the next step he would normally buy an in-app purchase, something he's interested in, and you say, hey, or you have a specific offer. You say, hey, we can enlarge what you have right now get whole Europe. It's really totally specific to the app, but in general, you can give him any message on any site with the retargeting solution.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. More questions? More coffee? No. All right. Well, thanks.